Day 2 at Big Ten Media Days. Nebraska is gone, and Nebraska still gets discussed by PJ Fleck. That's next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome in. It is Thursday here in the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you.
Is it?
Yeah, we're just full transparency. We're taping this Wednesday night. Mitch is about to pack up and work on getting out of Vegas here shortly. Day 2 of Big Ten Media Days wrapped up. We found a way to make Mitch a regular color. If you're watching along with us on YouTube,
I don't know. Am I yellow? I look slightly yellow in my view.
Just a nice, like you look warmer rather than being on a different planet yesterday.
Okay.
So that's better.
I'm actually here for another 24 or 28 hours or something like that. Day 3 is today, Thursday, as you watch this, and we got 6 more teams to take the stage at Big Ten Media Days. So I can't even imagine what it must be like for those people in the SEC who have 4 days of this, 2 days, 2 days down, and I'm ready to, I'm ready to just go to sleep. It's exhausting because you have 3 players from every team, and you have all these coaches, and you always have to be ready to have a conversation. And like I turn around and there's somebody from the Big Ten Network who wants to chat, and then there's a media relations person. I don't have enough bandwidth in my head to be able to produce all of these conversations. So if you're listening and I talk to you and it seemed like I didn't know who you were, I'm sorry. I just had a lot of conversations.
Stay on your toes. That's a lesson for Big Ten Media Days. So we got a couple things coming from that happened on Wednesday, day 2, including, as Mitch mentioned there in the cold open, PJ Fleck with some very, very kind things to say about Nebraska, and we'll readdress Tony Petitti's. Tony Petitti has been commenting further on defending his college football playoff format. But let's bring it back to a Nebraska topic first of all. Mitch, I can't remember if you and I talked about this today on a Wednesday on my show. It all kind of runs together, but I wanted to talk about Dylan a little bit, representing Nebraska for the first time at Media Days, and Dylan Raiola, that is, Dylan Raiola, Nebraska quarterback, representing Nebraska for the first time, doing a whole bunch of stuff, that comes with the part of being the quarterback and representing your school at Media Days and being a well-known name within the conference. I'm wondering, going into his sophomore season, how you feel like being around him is different, has changed. Matt Rhule will certainly tell you that he's got more stake in the game. He's got more ownership of the deal now. Like, in your time around him this week and really over the past summer or so, have you felt that sort of change in him, and what might that mean going into his sophomore year?
I just think it all comes a lot more naturally to Dylan. I talked to him about that on Tuesday in Las Vegas, about how a year can make such a difference, even if he's not to the place in the results that we've seen on the field with what Dylan wants from his college quarterback career. Like he had a freshman season that was up and down, and he plans to improve on those numbers and that consistency quite a bit as a sophomore. But there's a huge difference in the comfort level that he has to be in the limelight like he is. And he was in the spotlight like no other time in his career. Well, I don't know. I guess I don't want to compare Media Days to like playing on national TV against Colorado, right, but no other time off the field, I think he was in that spotlight. And that's several hour stretch on Tuesday at Big Ten Media Days, and he nailed it. Like, he handled himself as well as any of the quarterbacks who were here. Drew Aller was in Las Vegas on Wednesday, the Penn State quarterback who's going into his third year as a starter. You had Damon Williams from Washington. Preston Stone is the quarterback at Northwestern. He was in attendance on Wednesday. And, Dylan took a back seat to none of them as far as his ability to just have a good time, represent Nebraska well, say the right things about his teammates, handle the attention, not look, out of place or arrogant or all of the things that could be dangerous if that many people want to hear everything that you have to say.
I find it interesting oftentimes when, and maybe this is, help me decide here. Like, maybe this is just off-season stuff, or maybe, it's a part of him, but oftentimes the conversation surrounding Dylan, like, turns out to not be about football. It's about what he, what he does, or who he looks like, or what he acts like, and stuff like that. And there's always this kind of mysterious.
Who does he look like?
I don't know. We'll have to run that through an AI check or something like that. But there's like this kind of mysterious, like, what's he doing kind of thing about him. But like when he plays football, that's not what the conversation usually ends up being about.
Not what it should be about.
Yeah, I wonder if that all goes away. If this is just July being July. You know what I mean?
I think that followed him through the season last year.
Yeah,
and I think that's part of being a 5-star recruit. That's part of being somebody who was committed previously to Ohio State and then to Georgia, and chose to leave those programs, or he was never in those programs, but chose to part ways with those programs to go to Nebraska, which just like flies in the face of like what 18-year-old recruits do today. But obviously Dylan had a totally different story. He had a different backstory. He had a father who played at Nebraska and was a legend at Nebraska, and an uncle. I don't need to bore you with that. We all know the backstory with Dylan Raiola and his heritage that connects him to Nebraska. So he's a curiosity, I think, because of that, because of the path that he had and the schools that he's been affiliated with throughout his career. And that just like gets people's antennas up about Dylan. And to this point, he's not provided them, and I'm talking about fans outside of Nebraska and media outside of Nebraska. He's not provided them with something that they can latch onto about his play, other than that it's been like, yeah, okay, inconsistent. Fine. Like, oh yeah, you can see the potential there, but like, is he going to win a national championship? Is he going to be in the Heisman Trophy conversation? That's what people just come to expect and want. Like, the bar is set ridiculously high when you're a 5-star quarterback who was affiliated with Ohio State and Georgia in high school.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I thought, for the record, I thought he handled it, all that stuff pretty well this week. And I wonder, as the team becomes his and he has a leadership stake and a bigger voice, like he can kind of make it work in his way now, instead of, Rhule talked about this a lot on Tuesday. You're trying to catch up and you're trying to prove yourself a little bit as a freshman, and you're doing a whole bunch of different stuff, and you're also trying to fit in. Like, there's a social stuff that goes along with it as well. Now he gets to, kind of draw the painting whichever way he wants to draw it, which is fascinating. So I wonder what that ends up looking like. I wonder what the painting ends up looking like at the end of the year, just as far as the whole picture of Dylan Raiola, not just the football player.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about Dylan in his spot at Nebraska is he sets the tone for, I think, the entire roster, and how not just people perceive Nebraska, but how the roster, how the players on the roster act. Like, there are all kinds of new responsibilities and possibilities for players who are part of a, let's just say, $20+ million payroll when you combine revenue sharing with what Nebraska players are paid in outside NIL earnings. This is a new experiment for, well, I would say all teams in college football, but there might be some that we're already getting 20 million or in that conversation even before any of this stuff was above board. But you know what I'm saying? Like it's new territory, and Dylan as the face of the program, as the most well-known player at Nebraska, like he's the first one who gets to set the tone and who gets to like carry the flag. And I think players in the program now, it's not so much last year, but players in the program now they follow his lead. And something that you know, Dylan, he has his style, and he dresses nice and wore a fancy suit and interesting shoes to Big Ten Media Days. But what you don't see with him and what you don't see with Nebraska are $200,000 vehicles in the parking lot outside of the Hawks Championship Center. And I was having a conversation with one of the broadcasters from BTN on the long walk back. Oh, poor me, from the convention center to the elevator here at the Mandalay Bay today. And, you know, that's not necessarily all that common in college sports today, like in the SEC, in the Big Ten, at some places around the country. Like they wear it out there. Like you are going to see Ferraris when you go to the stadium. And, you know, I think Dylan chooses to act in a way that like fits what Nebraska is, and other players, many of them, fall in line behind him and represent Nebraska in a similar way. Now, maybe 5 years from now, you have somebody in his position who's the face of the program that goes about it differently. And it'll be a question then as to whether it's the kind of fit that he has helped provide for Nebraska as it begins to go into this era where players make a lot of money. I don't think that it works if they're flaunting it out there in the way that you might see and I'm not going to name any schools, but there are schools out there where it just looks a lot different. The way that college football players carry themselves today can look a lot different. Let's just say that than
no
how
doubt
it does at Nebraska.
Yeah, and that's the tone and the culture of your locker room. So definitely a strong sense there from the Nebraska side. Okay, quick timeout. Speaking of Nebraska, PJ Fleck, he's the coach at Minnesota. What does he have to do with Nebraska? Well, he answered questions about Nebraska on Wednesday at Big Ten Media Days, and man, he's bullish on the Huskers. More on that after this. But first, a word from our friends at the FanDuel Sportsbook. Summer sports are in full swing. Baseball under the lights, golf in the green, high stakes soccer action. FanDuel is there for you, and it's the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach or doing something else. It's your time to really lock in and dial in with the FanDuel Sportsbook. So you track the matchups on FanDuel Sportsbook. It could be your all-in-one sports app, but also you got the sense that, I don't know, Vinny Pasquantino is going to hit a home run today, or maybe 2 home runs at Wrigley Field, or
Good
something
timing.
like that. You could jump in on that action on the FanDuel Sportsbook, overs and unders, all the regular stuff as well, and get yourself ready for football season, which is just coming up right around the corner. All there for you on the FanDuel Sportsbook. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started.
All right, back on this Thursday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you. Get your mailbag questions in for Friday. We're going to have a regular Friday mailbag show. Highly anticipating the new global map, if it is to come. Haven't checked. Been busy this week. Haven't looked in the inbox. Hope there's lots of questions in there and maybe a new map from Nathan. That is tomorrow. On Wednesday, we heard from PJ Fleck, the Minnesota coach, who has won 5 consecutive games against Nebraska and 6 out of 7 in his time with the Gophers against the Huskers. That is a difficult pill for Nebraska fans to swallow. Well, I would say that there's always been like some animosity or like a heightened level of dislike, maybe is the way to say it, between from Nebraska fans toward PJ Fleck. So is that changing is the question, because Matt Rhule and PJ Fleck, they get along. They get along fine. Like PJ Fleck has talked this week about coaches that he likes in the Big Ten, coaches that he identifies with, that he finds himself maybe hanging out with a bit when they have that rare time. And he mentions Matt Rhule. And then Connor, you dug some of this up. I wasn't there to hear these comments. They were at a side podium from PJ Fleck, but he was asked today about Nebraska at Big Ten Media Days.
Yeah, he was. So a couple of the quotes stand out, about Rhule in particular, but also about Nebraska as a program. He called Nebraska, quote, one of the most dangerous teams in the Big Ten. He said, one of the most dangerous teams in the Big Ten is Nebraska. I know what Matt Rhule created at Temple. I know what he did at Baylor. I know what type of human being he is. He's awakening it. That's for sure. And then he talked about Rhule's vision. He said, we're all, as head coaches, finding and striving for clarity. I think that's one thing he always has. He has a clear vision of what he wants to do, what it looks like, what the expectations are, and how to get there. He's a process-oriented coach, and I think that is going to pay off. I think you're totally right. The first thing you said there, these two people, Fleck and Rhule, they think a lot alike. They have their isms. They both talk a mile a minute, right? PJ Fleck today got up to his main podium, or Wednesday, got up to his main podium stage and did not stop talking for 13 straight minutes and only took one question before he ran out of time and had to do more talking at the side session as well. So I think that would be an interesting dinner. If there was a third person, nobody would get a word in if it was Matt Rhule and PJ Fleck, but not hard to see why those two have a little bit of an affinity for each other, because I think they're both sort of known for getting a lot out of a little, maybe, or getting a lot out of less. And Rhule sort of hopes to turn that corner this year. And Fleck is going into his 9th season, which seems crazy already. And they've won a lot of games there. All they do is go to bowl games and win those bowl games. And like you said, they're 6-1 against Nebraska, and they play each other on a Friday night this year.
You can't argue with some things about PJ Fleck when it comes down to the production that he has seen in his time at Minnesota, like the number of wins, the draft picks, the All-Americans. Like, they continue to do it year after year. I mean, are they Ohio State? No. Do they have the resources and the foundation that Nebraska has? No. Are they successful? Do they win? Yeah. And it's not just like a flash in the pan thing that they're doing because whatever, they found the players who like PJ's slogans. Like, he's built a program there. Ceiling is not as high as what it is at Nebraska, but that doesn't matter if they're playing much closer to that ceiling than what we've seen. He I think he's genuine when he talks about Nebraska and he talks about Matt Rhule, and it's got to be a little bit worrisome because Nebraska goes to the Twin Cities again this year. And if he sees that the Huskers are awakening, then that's another challenge that, frankly, he hasn't had to worry too much about in most of his time in Minneapolis.
Well, it's interesting too, and not to bring it all back to one guy here, but I just don't think you would have heard PJ Fleck say that 3 years ago. I don't think PJ Fleck and the previous coach at Nebraska, without saying his name, really got along very well. I think they were very, very, very different personalities.
Yeah, and Nebraska fans kind of reveled in that. They're like, we got our guy, and he's nothing like PJ Fleck. So you go PJ and do your row the boat. And it wasn't even close as far as like who was more successful when the two of them got together. Now, he beat Matt Rhule in Matt Rhule's first game in what was like a dramatically difficult to handle type of loss for the Huskers. So, we'll see where this series goes. It's an interesting one to watch. You're right. PJ hogs the mic. The 13-minute opening statement was wild to watch. Like, the energy level just kept going up and up and up. And he actually didn't need to take that many questions because I think he answered all the questions in his opening statement. So, whatever. He created a trend. at Big Ten Media Days today because I think because of PJ, even with only taking one question, they were behind after PJ at the main podium, and they try very much to stay on schedule where each coach gets only 15 minutes. So when Luke Fickell got to the podium, he gave like a 4-minute opening statement, and then the moderator said, "Okay, we have time for one question." And so I don't know that Luke Fickell wanted to take a lot of questions coming off a season where the Badgers were 5-7 and Wisconsin lost its last 5 games of the season. So he can thank PJ for not having to stand up there under the bright lights for long. Although Fickell did get his 45 minutes in the back of the room later. So he had to talk about how Wisconsin of 2025 is not going to be like Wisconsin of last year.
It's Media Days is a good time to, especially when a team has a coach who is, I don't know, and you've been around for a long time. Fleck is, like I said, he's going into his 9th year now. It's a good time to kind of think about like Nebraska versus Minnesota, that game. I wish it would happen every year for the record, even though we're in a giant league now and it doesn't happen every year, unfortunately. But I think there's, like you said, there's a bit of something extra to that game. Minnesota loves playing on these night games and these Friday nights, and they'll play any day that's not Saturday, so they can kind of stand out in the Twin Cities a little bit. And so they like what they got going on up there. And Fleck has just kind of learned to deal with the rest. They don't get a lot of NIL support and campus support and anything like that, but they kind of just do it in spite of all that. And they're 6-1. Fleck's 6-1 against Nebraska. The only time he lost is when Frost beat him in 2018. And it was Frost's first win at Nebraska in 2018, which seems like a long time ago. That's a huge game this year. It's a big circle around that game on Friday night in Minneapolis this year.
And he's got another guy this year, Coy Parrish. He was a freshman All-American last year. Fleck could not stop talking about this safety from Minnesota, and the Gophers had to do everything that they was possible to keep him in the home state. Ohio State came in and tried to recruit him toward the end. So, we've seen these players come through Minnesota, a lot of wide receivers, and now they have a DB who is going to be someone who plays right away in his sophomore year at an All-American kind of level. So those are the things that elevate your program and that take you from being a middle of the road Big Ten team or bottom part of the Big Ten team that Minnesota was before PJ Fleck got entrenched there, and they become a threat. They become a team that goes to a bowl game every year. So let's talk a little bit more when we come back about Tony Petitti, revisit a little bit of what he said on Tuesday, how other coaches have fallen in line
behind him, as Mitch just left the podcast there real quick. We'll get him back here momentarily, but we're just about to send it to break. We'll talk about Tony Petitti and him continuing to defend his preferred playoff format. We'll do that all when we return. All right, welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you. Let's flip the other side here. That felt like an accidental X out of the tab there, or was that?
Yeah, it was not a bandwidth issue. That was me. Looking for something on my computer, and I think I hit a back button.
You were just gone,
and I'm just gone, and I'm gone. Thank you for picking up where I left off. I don't even know what I was saying. There were other things that happened at Big Ten Media Day on Wednesday that we'll talk about now.
Yeah, this is the third segment. All right, Tony Petitti. He got up there on Tuesday and talked about the reasons why he prefers the 4-4-2-2-1 method if they do expand the college football playoff. I saw this line that he dropped with John Canzano, who is a Portland area radio host and columnist, does a good job out there. He's been responsible for breaking a lot of Pac-12 news over the year, but now Oregon's in the Big Ten, the Pacific Northwest is in the Big Ten. Tony does not feel he needs to sell fans on his playoff format. He was even asked about that by your colleague, Stuart Mandel, on Tuesday at the main press conference. And Stuart talked about a Twitter poll that he ran, which was awesome, by the way. So listen to this quote. He said, because Petitti is a former MLB executive. He said, quote, MLB didn't stick a finger in the air and pull the public when we implemented the pitch clock in baseball. It never would have happened, and it's been good for the game. We just did what we thought was right. Do you think Coke pulls the public when it makes changes and thinks are good, changes it thinks are good for its business?
Coke.
My answer to that is yes, by the way. They do.
I'll always remember that moment between Stuart Mandel and Tony Petitti where Petitti challenges him on the data. Like, I'm not sure about the data that you have that the fans don't like my format. And Stu comes back with, well, I posted a Twitter poll today and here's what it said. It was just so great. Awesome. I can't believe the microphone didn't get ripped from his hand at that moment. You know, as we've gone through this event, coaches have been falling over themselves just to get in line behind Tony Petitti, and most coaches, and talk about whatever he wants, I support. I mean, it's almost as blind as that. Like if Petitti said, you know, I'm switching and I think we should have a 5-3-1-2-2-3-1 format. They'd be like, yes, that's the way it needs to be. Listen to Tony. Well, James Franklin, the Penn State coach, whose team is picked to win the Big Ten this year, and whose team famously plays Villanova, FIU, and some other huge dog in the non-conference this year, was asked at a side podium today about the situation with scheduling and the playoff, and basically the same question that's gotten other coaches to just fall in line behind Petitti. And he didn't rip Petitti. He didn't go against Petitti, but he did kind of step out of line from what is the normal Big Ten talking point by saying that the decision that the Big Ten made to go to 9 conference games, and this was back in 2017, they made the decision 6 years before that and then went to 9 conference games in 2017, was, quote, maybe the worst decision the Big Ten has ever made. This is James Franklin, the Penn State coach. And then he said, just mathematically, he talked about how the Big Ten was promised that by playing more conference games, it would get a bump in strength of schedule. And that just hasn't happened because the SEC is viewed the same way with its 8-game conference schedule. So he said, it's not that hard. Just get on the same page. Everybody needs to play 8 or everybody needs to play 9, but it just can't be different. Then he mocked all of college football by saying he's excited and happy about the Nittany Lions schedule this year, which, as I said, starts off with Nevada, Florida International, and Villanova.
Yeah. They do need to get on the same page. I still don't understand. It hasn't been made abundantly clear to me why the Big Ten. I feel like the Big Ten is using this as a bargaining chip to try to get the SEC to 9 games. If they budge and it ultimately works, then maybe this was a good thing after all. Maybe they trade the 9 conference games for the 5-11 playoff model, and Petitti does, and the Big Ten doesn't even care about the playoff model anyway. It's funny how you just laid out, what the coaches are doing behind Petitti. Mm-hmm. The way Sankey laid it out from the SEC was kind of like, hey, I talked to a lot of our coaches. This is kind of what they want, mm-hmm. And it does not seem to be that way from Tony Petitti, which is sort of fascinating to me. I don't know. I feel like this whole thing is a big, it's just a big bargaining chip to get to wherever we go to next. And I don't know who's going to budge on it.
Well, what's the best way? What's the better way? To be led by the commissioner, to have him make the decisions, to have him speak for the league, or to have the tail wag the dog, so to speak, is that what's happening in the SEC? Am I mischaracterizing that? I mean, the coaches and the programs are of course very important, but it seems to me that there's two contrasting styles between the leagues that drive college football. And it's extremely evident in the 4 days that the SEC spent in Atlanta recently, and now the 3 days that the Big Ten is spending in Las Vegas.
Yeah, and to be clear, like I agree with the SEC's method. I think the 5+11 model is just better. And I don't think any of the reasoning that Petitti has laid out for the 4+4+2+2+1+1 has really given it any sort of decided advantage over the other format. To be honest with you, talk about non-conference games, which also definitely won't matter in a world where only conference standings matter. It's just such an odd thing to try to sell to people. And clearly that sales pitch, I don't think this week has worked, but he doesn't seem to care.
The games won't matter, but we'll be more willing to play them.
Yeah,
that's how it is. It's like, oh, are they going to be exhibition games, or will they actually count in your record? Oh, we'll count them in the record, but they're not going to make any difference as to whether you get into the college football playoff, or very, very little difference. I shouldn't say no difference, because if you're out there fighting for one of those at-large spots at the back of the thing, then it's going to matter. The great thing is that all of this conference politics and positioning and leverage and whatever it is, we're not going to be talking about it next week, because all of these teams are going to start preseason camp next week. To finish it, I want to go back to James Franklin and something else that he said, as he was kind of on one today. I think he was mad because there were not very many in comparison to usual Penn State media in attendance at this event. That's a big difference for people from Western Pennsylvania to go to Indianapolis versus Las Vegas. For me, and for I think a lot of people in some parts of the Midwest, it's actually easier to get to Las Vegas because I can't get a nonstop flight to Indianapolis. So I don't mind. Plus I prefer Las Vegas to Indianapolis, like any day that ends in Saturday.
I do too, to be clear.
Yeah. Yeah. But James Franklin does not. And James Franklin, he likes walking into the hotel, whether it's in Chicago or Indianapolis, and seeing the signage for the Big Ten. They don't have that at the Mandalay Bay. They're not like wearing this out there in public. That Big Ten media days are in attendance. Like people who work at the hotel are curious. They're like, what is that? What is that thing that is here? Like there's several conventions going on at the same time at the Mandalay Bay, not just in Vegas, like at one hotel. And it's just an afterthought. Now, when you get to the event, it's not like there's a lot of nice signs and things, but James Franklin likes to be the big show in town. He wants the Big Ten to be the big show in town. And he's been a part of the SEC. And he's been to Destin for the conference meetings. He's been to Hoover for SEC media days. And he knows the way that the SEC is able to generate conversation by having, its show be the show. And that's not what it is. He said it's a different vibe and it's a different feel here in Las Vegas. And he would like to see the Big Ten do more SEC things to promote itself. And I think that's somewhat valid. That's a take. I don't know how much it matters on Saturdays in September and October, but for July and talking about it, it's a point that he's chosen to make.
Yeah, I think the general premise there is good, right? Mm-hmm. I think he's right about that. I just don't think this is the right application for it. It's media days. It doesn't need to be, this huge production. It's the media come and listen to press conferences. It's really not that big of a deal. If we're talking about conference championship games and conference basketball tournaments and stuff like that, then absolutely, I'm gonna hear him out on that one. That's a really good point I think he makes. But this, I don't know.
He likes walking into the hotel lobby and seeing the Penn State fans and getting asked for autographs, apparently, which is much more likely to happen in Indianapolis than it is in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I once again, I agree with him on the main point there, but I don't know if media days is under the cover a little bit. I don't think that's necessarily a black eye or anything like that on the league. And from what I heard, it's just a scheduling. They were double booked in Indianapolis or something like that,
and that's construction or something in the dome.
Yeah.
So Thursday at Big Ten Media Days, we are going to hear from the two teams from LA, USC and UCLA, with quarterback Nico Iamaleava in attendance. We are going to hear from the two schools from Michigan, Michigan State and Michigan, with its head coach, Sharon Moore, in attendance. He has not been suspended. And then, at least from this event.
Nice.
And then we are going to hear from Purdue, which is expected to be very bad this year. And
they are. Yes, they are.
And Iowa.
All right.
So there you have it. That's the lineup for Thursday. Kirk Ferentz will be here. We'll find a way to discuss in our Friday mailbag show what happened on Thursday at Big Ten Media Days. But mainly, we want to hear from you. We want your questions. If you have questions about Purdue or UCLA, send them along in addition to everything else. For today, thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has got the latest rumors, portal entries, and everything that's going on with the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.